Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of Thursday, March the 14th. I'll note that all of our council are present. First item on our agenda today is to review our agenda for the Monday evening council meeting. So council, if you'd please refer to that document. Do we know, Mr. Brady, anything on this agenda that you'd like staff to give us a presentation on?
No, Mayor, I think but we're ready to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Council, questions about Monday's schedule? Mr. Summers.
Mayor, I'd like to remove items 6A through 6D from the consent, and if we could just take all of those as a single vote on Monday night, that'd be fine.
6A and 6B.
A through D, sorry.
A through D,
Yeah.
okay.
So all of items under.
Everything with a 6 in front of it.
Yep. And then if we could just pile them into one vote, that'd be great.
All right. So these all appear to be related, correct? And so you're saying one vote would suffice. All right,
Yeah, we concur with
6 is off of the agenda, off the consent agenda. Council, any other questions about Monday's agenda? I should vote, or note rather, that next week is spring break, and so I will be with my grandchildren somewhere. Mr. Reddy,
But not here.
You're gone as well. So,
On Monday, yeah.
On Monday?
Yeah.
So we'll have a quorum of 5 here. Anybody else gone Monday?
Arm wrestling to find out who's going to be mayor.
We'll figure that out.
Whoever's tallest.
That's
And youngest.
Oh, okay. All right, so 6 is off the consent agenda. Council, any other questions or comments about Monday night's meeting? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2B on our agenda. I'm sorry, item 2A is a presentation and discussion on the potential projects for future general obligation bonds, including transportation, public safety, and parks and culture projects. So, Mr. Brady, we're going to break this up into different categories.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. So Beth will be making the presentation through, but she's got, as you can tell, we got the front row loaded up so that we can answer some questions. As we've kind of been discussing over the last couple of months about the possibility of considering a general obligation bond program for the upcoming election in November, the staff has tried to pull together a variety of projects. We've looked back at a lot of different things that have happened in the last couple of years, and I mentioned this during the strategic priority session of council. We've had a Parks Master Plan approved. We've had the Mesa Moves Transportation Plan from the previous initiative that we weren't able to get to all those projects. Some of the projects in the Mesa Move program that were approved or authorized in the voters, we've just, because of inflation costs, construction costs, are not going to be able to get to all of those, so we're rolling some of those projects forward. So we're trying to identify projects that have been in discussions with the community over the last couple of years and brought those forward to council. So this is not intended, we're trying to provide, I guess, a list, a starting list for the conversation. That we've just trying to gather from the different areas. You've heard presentations from the museums over the last year or so, so some of those are in different phases of improvements. So we're just going to go through all of these different projects, and the premise here is that we're going to present these projects to you. The idea, the direction we'd like to receive from council today is, one, so the idea is after we present today, we will show you at the end our schedule. We've already scheduled open houses throughout the city in the different council districts, as well as we're preparing a pretty aggressive social media engagement to share this information with the community and really get their feedback on the list of projects. Obviously, we're not going to be able to do all of these projects. It's really intended to kind of say, here's what we've heard over the last couple of years. We've tried to identify those projects. Here's those lists, and then try to get from the council, from our community, get kind of a gauge of interest of what sort of the most interesting ones. And then we would come back to council after those community meetings and kind of share with you the input that we received both on social media as well, the in-person, and then start having a conversation about how would we prioritize the projects, how do we identify kind of our funding capacity, and, you know, that's where it doesn't get fun, but that's where we have to kind of squeeze down the list. But today, this morning, what we'd like is to share with you the list based on, again, all this feedback that we've received over the last couple of years. But if council, if there's another project that we didn't identify here that you would like us to put out there with the community, this would be the time to do it, right? And it doesn't mean that we couldn't add something later. It's just, it seems like this is the opportunity before we really start our specific engagement to identify projects that we might want to consider.
So can you remind us, when do we need to decide what goes on the ballot? Is that
June
May,
3rd.
June?
June 3rd.
June 3rd, okay.
Yeah, that would be your formal decision.
It needs to be ready to go.
We probably in May need to be in a point where the council's saying this is what it
Right.
looks like.
So on June 3rd, we need to vote saying we're putting this baked project
Yes.
with the language figured out and,
Right, and we haven't even, we're not even we're going to present categories, but we haven't yet developed the actual questions, right? So you'll see categories, and that may very well result in the particular question, but really it's just intended for us to kind of create a way to organize, to present the projects to you this morning.
so we really should have our minds made up by May.
Yeah, that would be helpful, and
That would be really
Yeah.
helpful. Super
I
helpful,
would say the
Mayor.
sooner the better. Right? Okay. Julie,
Just preemptively, can I just ask this general question then? I totally, we've talked, so I understand why you're not wanting to put dollar amounts on anything yet. But at what point will we, and will we when we go out to the public? Like, I feel like that's really what people are just wanting to know is what the dollar, I mean, because I don't think anyone could look at these and be like, oh, no, I don't want all that. But like, what's it gonna cost? So I know, I'm just wondering what the time frame on the dollar amounts are.
we
gonna be.
certainly, some of these projects, because we're still early in just the concept, we haven't, some we could give you a number to, right? Because they're probably phase 2 of an existing project or program. You know, some of these projects you're gonna see, like we've talked about an indoor recreation community center. Part of that is we want to be able to go to the community and say, what do you want, right? And at some point, you're right, we're gonna have to put a dollar amount around it and say, well, it can't exceed this number. But at the same time, we do want to presume, and that community center, you're gonna see in the idea as well, we think there's room to put a community indoor recreation center and possibly a branch library next to each other. But then, you know, those are a lot of costs. So I think more we were trying to get people focused on the idea of what do they like, and we'll start bringing those numbers back. We're still working on them now. And some of them we have, right? So we obviously have some, but it helps for the council to help narrow us down because we could spend a lot of staff time creating really detailed analysis and then
Not be what the public
yeah,
wants.
well, or just, it's not even a project that anybody's going to bring forward. So,
Okay.
but when we come back to council after the community, while we're doing all this, we're going to be working on refining those numbers. And then when we come back to council, you know, like the next time, we'll have that. Because we're also going to have to share with council, okay, here's how much an impact these dollar amounts have on property
Individual, yeah.
taxes and things like that.
Because I do think that goes into like, neighborhoods might want a project at this much money, but they wouldn't want it at this much money. You know, like
Yeah, we haven't
But you just kind of want
usually our
to,
neighborhoods just say, I want that.
and figure it out,
And then
how
we'll
you're
figure it
gonna
out,
do
yeah. I mean,
Okay.
we could, what I wanted to get away with is sometimes we could add this all up, and then the headline is, City of Mesa is considering, you know, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for the project. Well, and then people start reacting like,
Right.
well, they're wasting money, that's ridiculous. And it's like, no, this was just our conversation about our visioning. We will come back with the dollars and have that conversation and that transparency of what things cost. We'll absolutely do that.
Yeah.
But today, we just wanted to start with is just talk about the projects and focus on, does this meet the needs of our community?
So by June 3rd, though, when we've kind of nailed down what projects we want to present to the public for a bond question, would we have dollar amounts?
Oh,
then?
no, we'll have
For
it, we'll
sure,
have
by-
it in probably end of
Right.
April and May,
Okay.
yeah. No, we're not that far behind getting you numbers.
Right, okay, thanks.
June 3rd is a Monday, so that's a council meeting.
Yeah,
The
that's-
first
yeah.
Monday.
It'll be on
So
the
we're
agenda.
saying no later than that council meeting is when we would decide what goes on the bond.
In May, we'll be diligently having these, I'm not going to put council up against the wall on the 3rd. We'll have conversations in May
No.
about this, yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Maybe if we can get early as April, so
All
we'll
right.
come back.
So before we hear from Beth, any other questions? All right, thank you, Beth.
Well, good morning. I'm Beth Huning, city engineer and kind of resident infrastructure nerd, right? Nerds rule, right?
We love it,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So, but before we start, like any good nerd, does anybody know what today is?
Yes.
All right. Hi, Dan.
Yeah.
And every mathematician.
Wait a minute, that wasn't in the approved PowerPoint?
Every mathematician celebrates by eating pie.
Apparently.
So we went to our favorite eatery, or one of our favorite downtown eateries, Republica Empanada, and we brought you little mini handheld pies that are very neat and tidy to eat.
Thank you.
Help yourselves, enjoy, and celebrate with us today. And today we want you to kind of sit back and join us because we want a dialogue. We want a dialogue with you. We want a dialogue with our community. A community is all about our people and our businesses and everybody who's here. Infrastructure plays a big role in community because it underpins community. It's there. It's like the gold thread in the tapestry that keeps us all together and pulls people together. So it's very critical to a community to have infrastructure. And we have a lot of options, a lot of possibilities when we look at infrastructure. So we need some guidance from you and from the community, which is why we've got a fairly robust public participation and information program and trying to draw people in to have those conversations with us. We put this together, my esteemed colleagues all back here in the first, second, and third rows are all ready to help me. There's quite a number of projects here. We loosely categorized them just to try and organize it for you today. The first being community safety. And the list of projects that we're currently showing, I think you've heard Mr. Brady talk about consolidating the Public Safety 9/11 Communications Center. We also like to expand our fiber network. We have a master plan for our, if you have questions, just stop me, okay? Don't just flow into it. We also have on here additional conduit and fiber. Data and communications is extremely essential to our public safety operations, as well as our other communications with our buildings and facilities. We need to continue to expand that to the south and east part of our community. We also have areas of the city that our data scientists have identified where we have fire stations, but we have large call volumes. We would like to develop a neighborhood medical response facility model, which would be a smaller type station that would help us in areas that need the additional call volume support. So I think those of you who are on the Public Safety Committee, you heard us kind of talk about the potential for something around the area of Station 205. That's a very heavy call volume areas, and we have a couple of those. We are working on a concept for this type of facility, and we'd like to consider that in the list. And then, as always, we need to replace fire apparatus as it ages out. So we would like to request some funding be added for the additional fire apparatus to replace what we have today.
Yes.
Beth, hi, good morning.
Hi.
It's Pie Day, by the way.
It is. Eat those pies.
The first one, Consolidate Public Safety Comm Center. What does that mean?
I'm going to ask.
Yeah, go ahead. Yes, let Scott.
I'm going to ask my favorite assistant city manager to come join me.
He's one of the
Wow,
best.
that's quite the honor. Thank you for that. Good morning, Mayor and Council. As many of you know, we have been looking at the way the city could further refine and enhance our 911 center, and both our police and fire dispatchers and our 911 call takers. One of the things we put all of the resources, and we've talked a lot with this body about the amount that you all have dedicated to police and fire resources over the last 5 years in particular. But the third leg of that stool, most importantly, sometimes is what happens, how the public engages public safety, how when they place that call to 911, what happens, how are they communicated with, and how do we get the appropriate resources, whether it be police or fire or both, to respond to that call. So we've engaged a national consulting firm that's helping us look at efficiencies, better conditions for our employees, things that we can do to improve their mental health and wellness aspects that go along with the stress of being a 911 call taker or a dispatcher. So we've been engaged in a study that is coming to an end in the next several weeks. But part of that, one of the things that's been very glaring both to the consultants and I think to Mr. Brady and to all of us as we've gone through this is the fact that we do lack the ability to better communicate with our facilities being separated. We have our 911 call takers and police dispatchers in one facility. We have our fire dispatchers in another facility. One of the things that the consultant has told us right from the start is that just co-locating those individuals into one facility would be a major boom for just communication and the ability as folks would be responding to joint incidents and other things like that, where you can just have a better flow of information. That would also allow us to, as we were talking about, to improve the workplace conditions of our employees. We certainly have some aging facilities that portions of this group work in, and that we really do need to invest in those facilities. The whole industry right now, the region is about to make a transition to next generation 911. Mr. Brady's been chairing a committee at MAG on that and looking at how the region is going to adopt that. So we have technology improvements that are coming for our employees, but we're going to need those physical improvements and then also other ways that we can make sure that police and fire are maximizing their ability to work together. We're also, on top of that, as you all are probably aware, most of the calls, 60+% of the calls that come into 911 are actually non-emergency calls. So we're also looking at opportunities that would be available through this consolidated center to find ways to offload those calls in a more effective manner, whether that's a 311 type system or whether it's something 311-like. We're still working through that right now, but that would also provide the opportunity to allow our dispatchers and our call takers to concentrate on the real emergencies and to be able to put their focus where it should be.
So Mayor and Council, real quickly, and I think Mr. Butler touched this, but police is outgrowing the location where they're at. They'll be they're pushing that space as far as functionality. And then just the idea, we don't have the best in class having police and fire separated. I mean, not only just separated, they're separated by miles. And, we've been able to look at and listen into calls, and it does have an effect on our service, especially if there's a joint response that's needed between police and fire. It's just not a good model, and our consultants have verified that. Mr. Butler and I've seen how they do it in Tucson, and they're all under one roof. While they're in their own pods in their own areas, if there's something going on, they just look across the room and they're communicating right away, or they can talk about what's happening and making sure they get the resources. So it's one, a customer service perspective, because right now, even our systems don't talk to each other. You have to repeat what the call taker receives on the first time, back again the second time if it's going to fire or a medical call. That's not good. There's no way for those two groups to really communicate back and forth when it's a joint call. So we don't know how, we can't just take them and put them in where they exist today. We're trying to figure out a way, whether it's an existing building down in 708, but this is just a primary public safety issue that we've got to address. So we're not sure, we're looking at all our options, but we feel very strongly, and it's been validated by the consultant, that best practices is to have these at least under one roof. And so we've got to find a way to do that. So that's what this is giving us that opportunity to look for.
Mr. Reddy.
I think as far as co-locating, are we looking at the the baseline facility?
Yeah, that's the
or-
first place
that's
we'll
what-
start, yeah. See if there's room that we can put them both in there, yeah.
And with that, do we have enough space? I know we set up the emergency response.
Yeah, and that could easily move back to where, if we consolidate, if we let, and we don't know, right? But
Oh.
there's a theory that if we can bring them all down to the baseline, that would be great, but then the Emergency Operations Center could move for PD's vacating and, but we don't even know if we have space down there. We have to really, we have to look for not only what we have, of what we need today, but we've got to look a little bit of future proofing and seeing where that is. But it's just, there, this is, the we can't take those 911 calls.
Sure.
We just have to make this is probably, I would say, this is the #1 priority in public safety in Mesa, Arizona right now, is figuring this out. So.
Just a follow-up comment, I had the experience, I think minutes and seconds are extremely important when a call comes in to our 911 dispatch center. And I had the experience that when I called in on a potential fire, the call taker was really great, wanted an address, but then sent it over to fire, who then asked for the same additional information. It delayed the call, it delayed the time of response, and so we do need to streamline that. And I think co-locating our communication center is important so that just morale and everybody working cohesively together is extremely important. And I just know we can do a better job with that. And so I appreciate you looking into it, whether we build a new building or not.
Yeah, we just,
That would be.
we don't know, we have to.
Yeah, we don't know. So I think we have some assets that we could maybe work on.
Or hope.
So with that, that's why I asked the question, to get a little bit more intel.
Ms. Pillsbury.
Hi, thanks. So we can't have this conversation without mentioning our mental health professionals as well. If you're calling, like the Solari, so all of that is included in this, like they're already there, so just.
Well, so they, yeah, and they're there. And what's impressive is Solari has their own comm center.
Comm center, yeah.
And it's
Right.
consolidated. I mean, they're doing across the country. I mean, we were there, they were taking calls in Oklahoma.
Wow.
And so they have it's like a floor of just an office building. And they're very impressive what they have, so,
Yeah, I
yeah.
could
But we're connected to them. We can send them calls, they can
Okay,
have somebody in the
Just
room.
wanted to make sure, since we're pretty cutting edge
Oh.
on that,
No, no,
I'm
no.
really proud of it, I want to make sure.
Oh, absolutely.
And then just one other point, I want to make sure, as we look at systems and communicating, which I love, I think anything we can make this more efficient to help the safety of our constituents is great. So I would also love for the park ranger system to be included in that as well, so that they can communicate better. I know they don't have like the 911 dispatch necessarily, but they're part of our public safety team as far as the first contacts with parks. So I would
right.
love for that connection to
So
happen.
we actually have a seat now for them, or I don't know if we filled the position, Andrea, to put in the real-time crime center. Right.
Oh, awesome, okay. Just so that they're also.
Right, no,
part
that
of
was why we wanted to put
communication.
them there, yeah.
Great, thanks.
Well, and also, I think the radio traffic there, they work together on police and their own radio traffic, so they have combined
Sometimes
traffic.
I know there's.
Kind of going back to Julie's initial question, you say, we don't know what it looks like, we're not sure if it's, by the time by June.
We'll know
you'll
the
have
square
those
footage,
details?
yeah, we're
Okay.
working on that right
Where-
now.
How you're going to do it,
Yeah.
how much it costs.
We know, see, they work together. They were on the same floor. And for a variety of reasons, some based on just growth, the decision was to move them down and baseline. And it hasn't,
How long ago was that?
it's been,
About a decade.
yeah,
10
10
years.
years. And now we're just seeing, what the consultants came in and kind of verified that you're now seeing that doesn't work well. So the challenge is, we're growing in both areas. We've taken on other communities' 911 dispatch, so we have to size it right, and that's what we're trying to do. And we do have facilities, we're trying to figure out if we can renovate them, but we have a group working on it right now while we're having these discussions to try to come back with a cost that we can use in the future.
Is that service for surrounding communities going to be a long-term? I mean,
Well, we
that's-
have it, remember, some of our, I mean, it's, I can't remember all the communities, but it's just some of the smaller Fort McDowell was one.
Well, yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, on the fire side in particular, we serve as a regional dispatch center for several agencies, primarily in the East Valley, and as Chris just alluded to, some of our tribal partners as well. On the PD side, besides the city of Mesa, we also dispatch for the town of Queen Creek. Which that was to really, since they were standing up a new department, didn't have the same facilities, that was a partnership that we entered into on the PD side. But on the fire side, that's very common. There are 2 regional dispatch centers in the metro area. One is the city of Phoenix and the other is the city of Mesa. City of Phoenix dispatches for 20-some agencies, is that right? And we dispatch for 7 agencies, primarily in the East Valley, and that's expected to remain.
And we're compensated for that,
We are,
yeah.
correct.
Yeah, you've proved the IGAs. Yeah. But space wasn't, we kind of had to pigeonhole this into the existing space, so we need to find opportunities. We have to deal with the consolidation as well as making sure we're building enough space for both of them and taking on these other responsibilities.
The only comment I'll add is I think it's not a bad thing that 60% of our calls are not, actual public safety emergencies, because to me, that shows that people are reaching out, asking for help. They're a little confused as to exactly the right phone number to call, right? But I get that. And if we have a 311 and a 411 and a 711, I mean, that's going to, I don't think we want to scold people when they need help and they call up and say, I need, are there resources available? So I love the fact that when you're interacting with a homeless person, we used to say, by all means, don't call 911 because you're going to clutter up the emergency lines. And then I think later we said, you know what, go ahead and call 911 because it's okay for our public safety people to interact with those folks and to help them, get services and to triage if it's a mental health situation or what it is. So I'm just saying that I don't think it's really all that broken if we're getting fire and police calls on the 911 line.
Right, Mayor, so what we want to really achieve is to get those calls off of the call taker as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So they're not having to go and figure out, well, how do you get that smoke detector fixed? How do you find services?
Yeah.
So we can find another group, send it to another group that's just they can do that social service, answer those questions without backing up the calls that may be coming in for an urgent emergency. That's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely, but I'm saying if we have a one, there's no wrong door approach, and then we can quickly download it to the correct department, I don't think that's a horrible idea.
It's just right now, we build it as we're taking everything as an emergency,
Yeah.
and we've got to figure that out.
And Mayor, as Chris said, if there's a dedicated unit that immediately you can offload those calls to, and that there's someone that's trained and ready to help get you connected to the appropriate city resource, that's exactly what the goal is. We wouldn't diminish our customer service, we'd actually enhance it by allowing our public safety professionals to concentrate on what they need to, and then we would have a group dedicated to help on those other the issues that they call, whether it be a pothole or a chirping smoke detector, they just didn't know who else to call.
What we're trying to avoid is a stacking of those calls, because there are times, not always here, but in other communities, where you're essentially on hold when you call 911.
Yeah,
So that's what we're trying to do.
If that's the alternative, obviously, I guess I'd like to have customer service that you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's right.
I would like to have the capacity not be.
No, I think it's just a way, we just have to figure out a better way to deal with those calls when they come in.
Mr. Reddy.
I think just a comment, if we're investing into this consolidated communication center, we look at how we create the all communications hub, because I know you'll need servers, upgrade the fiber, even our emergency as a response piece. Looking at a facility that can house all these professionals in one roof, I think makes sense. I know space is an issue and kind of the personnel, but if we can figure out a way to consolidate all communications hubs, because of the investment of these servers and equipment that is not cheap. If we separate these pieces, I think
Yeah.
we just end up more cost maybe.
Yeah,
But just
so-
a comment there.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilman Reddy, as Mr. Butler mentioned, there's actually a significant conversion taking place across the entire state to go to next generation 911. And now really all of that, there's not any servers on site anymore. It's all being hosted. Comtech, I don't know what's that, Comtech, whatever the name of the group is. So at the end of this year, I think it is, it's already, the conversion's already taking place with other communities where all their equipment's being replaced out. And the state is the one that procured the contract, and they have already procured the contractor. So they're kind of moving through the state and replacing all of the existing equipment with the next generation 911. So that's, I think we're scheduled like in November
We are.
timeframe.
That's correct.
So that, we'll be seeing all that new technology coming in. So in some ways, it isn't as on-site, you don't have as much equipment as you did before. Yeah.
All right. Mr. Summers?
If I could bounce off Councilmember Heredia's, because he hit a really important point, which is a lot of communications about technology and interaction today is more about technology. Integration, right? We have meetings on Zoom, there's various ways of consolidating these dispatch centers and making them more interactive together than just a physical location. You know, the example of collecting data from a call, hey, I need the information, address, and then it's handed over to the fire department, information, address, the same thing. That's not a physical location problem. It's a technology integration, a software integration problem. So when we look at this from a perspective of integrating, is it really necessary to have the physical integration of two organizations that at the end of the day are going to have two separate wings? So you're not going to be able to stand up and yell over at the other dispatcher, hey, Frankie, here's the address for this. There's other integration methods. So what I'm interested to see moving forward is, is it more cost effective, given how much cost everything's going up, to keep them separate, because Phoenix has them separate, but integrate them using updated technologies and servers and that kind of thing?
Yeah,
What's the more cost-effective
But that's
move?
not the recommendation, that is not best practices.
Yeah, I know what the recommendation as a consultant is,
Yeah.
and I've been a consultant in public safety too. I even have a business card for you.
Right, but council,
So-
I would say this, that is not our priority. Our priority is, it doesn't make any sense. We've seen how it works in other places. The consultant's telling us this is not best practices. We owe it to our public safety personnel and our community to provide the best level of service. The equipment is being replaced, whether we like it or not, because the state has the contract. All of that's going to happen. The NG 911 system will be fully integrated and connected across the entire state. So that issue will go away. The software that, for whatever reason, we can't have that information passing from a call taker to the next call taker, we can fix that. But culturally and joint response, we are just not providing the highest level of service by having separated purposes for public safety, because the customer is just
Didn't we
having a bad
have
day.
a single 911 center for a while?
Yes,
And then we separated it?
right.
We did.
Because that was the best practice. Now we want to put it
No,
back
that wasn't
together.
the best practice even then. It was
Well, you
just, we
say
were
that
out.
now, but somebody decided to separate it, and we said it was a best
It
practice.
was not the
right?
recommendation of, it was a split recommendation about doing that, but it became an issue of space. And it became an issue of, we just didn't have, we were going to outgrow the space with both police and fire. And the decision was made by council to move them.
Okay. Well, I don't necessarily object to this, but you're going to have to show me where the consolidation of the physical space is an important component, because really it's about a technological space.
It's both, it's both.
Yeah, Mayor and
Well, prove
Councilmember
it.
Summers, we'll be glad. I think Chris is right. It's not either or. It is both. There are examples, and we can certainly.
Yeah, and not to
chat with you
belabor
about
the
that.
point, but I'm looking forward to those conversations so
Exactly.
that the evidence can
Okay.
be presented.
Absolutely.
We've been talking for 35 minutes and we're on your Beth's second slide. So
Yeah.
just to give the heads up to some people in the back row, we may or may not make it all the way through this agenda today. I'm sorry, Beth. Take it away.
Ready to go? So these are the projects that we've outlined for public safety. If there are any other questions, I will,
Let's move on to the next slide.
okay. Okay, sorry.
Let's not talk for 35 minutes about this, but, so as far as the neighborhood medical response facilities, would we have just the concept that we would be working towards, or we would have like exact locations?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, we do have one location right now that Beth had alluded to that's in the Greenfield corridor where we are seeing just a tremendous amount of medical-related calls that are putting burdens on our existing units right now. So that is the first area that we've identified as in need of a medical response.
So I know we had the map that showed like where there were holes, but this specifically is saying where we have a lot of calls.
Yes.
Okay.
That is.
And that's how we would place these in the future. I think by the time we get through the study, we will have a specific identified area for the first one of these, but we'll also show what we'll probably end up doing is saying, here's one that we can identify a location and we can build the facility. We're just trying to size the facility because when we're building, because we don't need it, we're not building it for pumpers, we're not
Right,
building it
right.
for overnight.
Smaller.
It's just, a medical response unit. But we'll also probably come to council and say, here's one that we need to build now. And then we're also going to be trying to identify within what the data is telling us where there are other gaps are and try maybe at least start to identify location of a property that we can start acquiring so that in the future we could build those out in the future.
So they would technically not be part of this bond package?
No, they would.
Those future ones?
So,
Oh,
well,
even the
maybe we
future
wouldn't
ones?
have, we'll see. We
Okay.
don't know if we'll actually be ready to go to the point of building them out, but maybe we would go buy the property and the location so we could deal with that in the future.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Another part of great community safety and connecting our community are efficient street networks. So back in 2019, 2022, in that timeframe, we did a Mesa Moves program with our transportation department, and we looked at projects that the community felt were important, and we identified Mesa Moves projects. Unfortunately, with the way that inflation's working, there are several projects where we were unable to get to from the last bond election. And so you can see those 4 projects on the screen. Elliott Road, Ellsworth Road. I think if you've driven out on Ellsworth, you will all agree that there is some work needed out there. Stapley Drive and University and Southern and Country Club are the 4 that we were unable to reach with our prior bond program.
Quick question. I know the folks in Queen Creek are anxious for us to make some of these, the Ellsworth Road improvements, for example, so much so that they've been willing to advance funds to do that.
So they were able to do that on some other projects, Mayor, so they've completed those projects.
Okay.
What was the one?
Signal View.
Signal Butte, and then far west, the east, what's the?
Meridian?
Meridian.
They
They
did.
did Meridian, yeah.
I wonder how they'd feel about, Ray to Germain.
Well, they feel pretty strongly about
Yeah,
it, Mayor,
but
so.
will they write us a check?
No, I don't, I think they've written all the checks they're gonna write right
All
now.
right,
I think they're writing checks for a big battery company right now.
that's true. Okay, thank you. I was just saying that a lot of the people that are clamoring for that street have a Queen Creek address. And so I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
but we also have a lot of big businesses, especially what's happening on the east side of the airport. This is important there.
I
It's
agree.
it's the east side of the airport, and then obviously all the development in the industrial area as well, that's putting a lot of load on Ellsworth.
Also, if I may, the Arizona Athletic Grounds is here. We're going to see some new hotel and retail development in this area pretty soon.
Oh, yeah, Ellsworth is paved with gold. I mean, we'll do well out there, but I just.
We'll try to use asphalt, but.
I think I just think there's a regional component to this that this is going to be very valuable for Mesa, but it's also
Sure, no, there's no doubt.
unlock.
But
Queen Creek.
they've definitely picked up, but with Signal Butte and Meridian, that's really helped.
Great. Ms. Duff.
Yes. RJ, I know we're doing a Safe Streets for All.
Correct.
A grant, a study. How will that integrate with these projects? Or,
Mayor, Councilmember Duff, we're really just getting going. We have the consultant on board. We're going to be working through our Transportation Advisory Board. We actually have an agenda item next Tuesday to talk about the development of the Safe Streets for All plan. The two projects in particular that are in West Mesa, Stapley Drive and University and Southern and Country Club, just need the work done. I know we've met several times to talk about Southern and Country Club in particular. The challenge we have there is physical space in terms of right-of-way. We're kind of constrained on all four corners, so what we're looking at right now is just a reconstruct of the existing intersection. And Stapley and University is about efficiency. We'll be adding turn lanes and, we call it an intersection blowout. So these projects, if they stayed in, would sort of move forward as is, but we're going to look across the city using the data we gather from the Safe Streets study to determine what improvements we'll make citywide.
so Southern Avenue and Country Club, I know we've talked about it a number of times, is one of our most dangerous intersections for pedestrians. We have lots of public transit and a lot of people, and I was hoping that when we reconstructed the intersection, we can maybe look at some possible improvements. I know you say there's not room, but I think leaving it the way it is it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse as we have more population. And we have how many bus stops? I don't know, 3 bus stops on those corners? I don't know. I would like to see some kind of safety analysis done so that when we reconstruct that we're making it better for all users.
One addition that we are making to that area, Councilmember, is a pedestrian hybrid beacon at the QT gas station south of the intersection, because we've identified that there's a lot of people crossing from west to east or east to west at the gas station location. So that is, that doesn't exist today. So that is a safety component of the project. But I hear what you're saying about the project as a whole.
I think people, there's long light cycles because it is a large intersection and such, and we have all the buses and such. People push it, because if they miss that bus, they got to wait another 15, 20 minutes. They're possibly, if there's, anyway, I would like to look at some possibilities of making it just safe for all users and instead of just accept that it's acceptable. Thanks.
Were these identified in the previous Prop 400, and then are they identified in the next iteration of Prop 479?
These are included in Proposition 400, Councilmember. We tried not to duplicate projects from Prop 400 to the upcoming Proposition 479 that'll be voted on this fall. We're working very closely with MAG staff and trying to make sure we get the dollars that are allocated towards Mesa. And if you recall, that fits to the Mesa Moves project as a whole, that while we borrowed, or will have borrowed, $100 million general obligation bonds, some of that money leveraged reimbursement from MAG, which gets us up to a total of about $160 million. Okay. So if we can add Elliott and Sossaman as an example, we'll get, we're paying the cost up front, but then we're getting money back that we can use in active transportation projects or street reconstruction, that sort of thing. So we're actually going to be talking next week with the Councilmember Goforth's committee about how transportation is funded in Mesa, because there's a lot of pots that the money comes from.
So these will be leveraged with, potentially if it passes with Prop 400.
Well, we don't need to wait for the election. They're in the current. The question is whether we're ready to step up with our match. Okay. And so far, and I will tell you, looking at this slide, I don't think all these projects are going to make the next round, right? Because they're going to be very expensive. Mm-hmm. And so we'll see whether they get included. These intersections are very expensive because it's not just there's a lot of things going on there. Yeah. And they were approved because they were there to provide safety and deal with congestion. So, but we'll just have to see whether or not this is the round that we can pick them up. Yeah. And if we do, there's leverage from the Prop 400 So we don't have, they're in the Prop 400. What we're going to be up against is whether or not we get those projects completed before that expires.
Yeah, the timing. That's my question, the timing of these.
Yeah.
how
We'll have to
we-
come back and look at that.
We would like to leverage as much as funds
Yes.
as possible that we're able to
Yes.
get these.
We have a standing meeting with Beth's staff, and we talk about project coordination, because there are some pretty firm deadlines that we have to have the funds committed by.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand what Mr. Brady just said. There's Prop 400 money that we still are spending, and then there hopefully will be Prop 479 money. So is that your question,
None of these
Mr.?
projects are 479.
Correct.
These are
Okay.
all, we're in the existing Prop 400. But it always comes down to the cities have to be in a position financially to fund these before you can get the reimbursement. And again, we've just, from a priority standpoint of all the projects we've been doing over the years, these are kind of at the tail end of the Prop 400. Whether or not we'll be able to get to them all before it expires, we don't know. It's just, again, it's a financial commitment that we have to look at.
So if we authorize the city's portion through bonds for these remaining Prop 400 projects, and then we run out of money first, then we just won't issue those bonds.
Well, the good news is if we issue that, we have the money authorized, then we can spend it and get our reimbursement for these projects. So that's good. The challenge is whether you're right, Mayor, it's just a matter of us coming up with the funds on the front end and taking that to do it. We'll come back with an analysis on this. It's just these are very expensive projects.
So the bond is not covering the entire project, is what you're saying? I mean, you say come up with the money, but
Yeah,
is
the
that
way
why
we-
it's on here
No.
for today?
Right.
Is part of
We'll
the-
come back with you. I think when we did that Mesa Moves, as RJ was saying, we set up 100, what was the number?
162 million was the total program.
Program, but 60 of it.
Was reimbursement
Was
money.
going to be reimbursement from MAG. So that's why they are very attractive projects from that perspective, but it's the capacity of the bonds that kind of gets in the way too. And frankly, delivering these projects is just, it's a heavy lift, right? Because there's all the MAG requirements we have to go through. And then there's usually utilities.
Utilities.
We have to deal with, so it just takes, even if you have the money, it takes years to get some of these projects done.
All right, sounds like a lot of.
We'll
good-
come back, yeah. It's just we wanna
Future,
put what's on the
subjects for
list.
future
Yeah.
discussions. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next category, we are frequently receive comments about things our community would like to see in terms of allowing them to have active lifestyles, active, healthy lifestyles. So this category covers a lot of different things. You'll see parks, trails, paths, all of the areas we need for outdoor enjoyment as well as some indoor, which is our first one. Our first project is a Central Mesa Community Center or something in that area. As you know, we've got Broadway, we've got Eagles, and some of those facilities we're frequently asked because of our very hot summers for indoor play. Some of the possibilities for a center like this is, as you can see in the pictures, running tracks, fitness spaces. These are things that we get requests for. Indoor courts, indoor playgrounds, strength training. We did a little bit of a land search in this area to try and see what was available, and there isn't a lot of big acreage parcels. We actually found we actually own one of the largest parcels in the area, just east of Gene Autry Park, right across the canal, and it would fit nicely on that parcel. We need part of that parcel for flood control in the future. Part of it's in the floodplain, so we would identify the south of that for that site. But everything would fit there nicely. One of the other intriguing things about this site is it also fits very well into libraries' master plans. We need to find a place for a library in Central Mesa, and we could co-locate it on this site, which if built together, it offers a lot of advantages in terms of mobilization, costs, different ways in the way we manage and operate the facilities, and they could share some facilities. So you'll see me later talk about a branch library in this area. I think there's 29 acres here, and 76,000 square feet is kind of based on the model from Red Mountain.
So I understand like the location's kind of perfect as far as that we already own the land and it's right by Geotry, which is already a recreational facility and stuff. I have a little bit of concern just the location, just because that's a fairly affluent area right there. And so a lot of those families have money to have gym memberships and other things. And if you come further south to like my Mesa High boundaries, which would be about Mesa Drive to Higley, and then the freeway north to Maine. That's Mesa High school boundaries. We just are really lacking anything like this there. We're fairly close to the Gilbert Rec Center, but I don't want to include that in the conversation because it's Gilbert. But that's like where my kids and their friends would go, because even though this is only maybe like 4-ish miles or 5 from some of these, that's a really far if you're a kid, like, or if you're, you know, it's just, it's not very neighborhood conducive to kids being able to use it in the summer, teenagers and stuff like that. So I would love it if we could just maybe look one more time, a little bit more south, and just kind of see if there's any opportunities. Maybe you've already discovered that there's just not, and that this is really just the best place. Because I would never want to say no to this, because I think this is a really great opportunity. It's just when I think about the constituents in my district, since this is my district, I mean, it borders Alicia's, but there's just, with the Red Mountain Recreational Center being just a few miles away from this as well, I hesitate with the population that maybe needs it the most, so.
We'll definitely go back and look at this. Remember, these are all possibilities. I will tell you, based on the initial searches we did, it's extremely hard to
Yeah.
find.
And with the
place for
advantage
this.
is we own this property.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it keeps the
Keeps the
price
cost
down. We
down.
don't have to go buy
Right.
property. And the fact that it is connected, we could connect it, we think, with a bridge across
Across
the
the
canal
canal.
to the ball fields. It just became, it kind of, and when we run the, if you look at the Parks Master Plan and the Library Master Plan, and they do their circles where the gaps are, this really does fit pretty well
It
inside of
does,
that.
right. I thinking of that area as well, there's holes there with libraries and recreational facilities. Again, it's just that a lot of those people living in that area can afford, they're on their own, other options for recreation. So that's my only comment I'll make on that, because we've talked, I know how difficult it is, and I love that we own this land, like, that's huge, but, and maybe people would drive farther than I think they will to get to it, so.
We can definitely go back and look at that, but I do know, I looked at the land maps myself.
We do have great parks. In that stretch, we have some really great parks, so I appreciate that. We just don't have really like the indoor facilities.
Good morning, Council.
Let
Andrea
me
Moore
just
with
add
Parks.
before, let me just, I want to tag on to her. I think the programming for Gene Autry Park is phenomenal. It's packed all the time. It's utilized. We have everything in place there, and then having something to incorporate next door, it's just automatic. People, if you build it, they will come. And regardless of the demographics, I think I heard
They
that
will
somewhere
get
before.
used.
I think utilizing our space there that we have, creating a great asset and a park and just the experience, it will complement what we're already doing at Gene Autry in the area, and people will.
And as you can tell by what we're trying to do, and this, again, this is conceptual, we're trying to move it as far away from those affluent neighborhood as possible so that they don't have any effect to it. We're just struggling, but the number one request, I think, on the recreation side is more indoor space. And when you're doing that, having McKellips and Greenfield as an intersection is also a huge, kind of an easy to find location, so that's kind of where
Yeah,
this.
I'm not saying no to this, or that I think it's a horrible idea, or that I don't want it, because that's not what I'm saying. Anyways, I'm not going to belabor the point. Go ahead.
Council, I just want to add, if you think about our rec centers now, there's different service models. And what we're trying to achieve here is not a replacement for a fitness center as much as it is a community gathering space, space for classes, space for teens to come together, youth to come, preschool age, elementary age to come for enrichment classes. And that is in that service area. It's not that we moved it up that far north in order to address a vacant piece of city of land. But we could also use in future years other types of indoor recreation centers, more like Eagles, Jefferson, Webster, where it is a more neighborhood-based center in lots of places. So yes, that's where we have a service gap further south, is those types of neighborhood-based centers. This is a regional-based center for more of a center of activity it is the right location for that service model.
Andrew, before you leave, it looks like the bottom third of this is proposed for flood control. To what extent is that compatible with youth sports fields? Is that can we have a twofer there, or is that not
Mayor,
possible?
we're looking at just doing desert landscaping in there, trying to keep activity to a minimum across the canal from the residential
There's the
area.
residents we're trying to.
So we're trying to keep most of the active recreation further north and right across from the existing park
It'd
amenities.
be right in some backyards.
I hear you. I'm still not, I mean, but you do have that's a wide canal. I mean, and if you put the lights up in the right way and we had some,
We could propose it,
parameters,
we're trying to avoid.
why not poke the bear a little bit and see?
Those are my ideas.
Those are
This
your
is,
bears.
okay, I am term limited and I am,
You would not be the one getting those emails.
I'm just saying, we still have I mean, in spite of our best efforts, we still have we're not where we want to be as far as youth sports fields go. And so I'd be curious, and I know that this, I'm not going to have a say on this. This will be future councils, but I'm not opposed to the idea of exploring having turf there and using it.
We could put it out there and just see what kind of response we
Yeah.
get, but we don't want to lose the whole thing because somebody would be opposed to that.
I get it.
Kind of rile people up
That
against
just,
the whole thing.
we'd have to, I mean, I think you could buffer it, I think you could put up a wall, and that canal is already a pretty good natural barrier. The other, I'm sorry, go
Well,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor, but I mean, we have all the ball fields right north of that too. I mean, do you get
Yeah.
complaints about that, Julie? Yeah.
Yeah.
Were they there?
I'll just also piggyback on something Julie said, and what really Andrea said. There's plenty of adult fitness centers in this area. And it is an affluent neighborhood, but it's an affluent neighborhood that's across the street from trailer parks. And so the demographic there is very mixed. And to Andrea's point, I think a lot of people from the broader region would be traveling to bring their kids here. And I do think an indoor youth rec center is really towards the top of the list of the things that Mesa needs, right?
And that's one of the things we'd like to do is once we decide, this is something interesting, that would be part of the development of the programming and how the space would be built out to accommodate all that kind of,
Yeah.
what the community would like to see.
Yeah, I don't see it as an adult fitness. I mean, Mountainside Fitness is literally across the street. So that's not who we want to compete with. We want it to be something for during the summer, a boredom busters thing during the summer when it's 110 degrees outside.
If I made it sound like I thought this was just an adult gym, which apparently I did since 3 people have said that now, that's not what I meant. I'm just saying even teenagers that can go to gyms to play basketball or racquetball or whatever, or these summer programs that kids get the opportunity to go to. If their parents have to go to work, they're not going to be able to go 4 or 5 miles to go to a summer program. I just want to look out for kids who don't have as many opportunities. That's all I'm saying. So
I think
wherever
we're saying the same thing.
Yeah. So again, I think there's a lot of programming that can be done here that's probably needed right here too. I just think it's a little far for a lot of the people that I'm worried about.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so moving on to slide 9. Another request we get frequently are outdoor trails and paths. This is the map that our transportation department manages, put together a master plan for paths, shared use paths in the city of Mesa. And I am going to point out some of the paths we were identified in the Mesa Moves program. Again, we could not get to these in the past bond program, and that yet they are still heavily requested, and we've done studies and done some design work on these. There's 4 of them. This one is the Lehigh Loop Phase 2. Phase 1 is under construction. Center Street, Broadway to Stadium Connector Path, getting some connection in this area for walkability, bikes, peds. And then as you go east along the US 60, the consolidated eastern canals is kind of a gap we have there. Mesa Gateway Phase 3, we've been slowly working our way down along the 202, and we have a gap from Hawes to Power Road that we'd like to connect people with. So those are 4 of the shared use paths that we have on the docket right now.
And again, just quickly, Beth, every single one of these, we've done some level of design
Yes,
work, right?
we've done
Some
studies
a
or
little further
design.
along than others. So the good news is some of these are getting closer to shovel-ready, or they're being in a position where they can go out and compete for grant funds
Yes.
and other competitive dollars. So that's why we've identified these.
So these were on the previous,
Yes.
Mesa Moves 2020
22.
or 22?
2020.
2020.
Time gets away
So
from
they
me.
were on that, but we haven't, so
So
they're
for-
on another,
So what we did is, in that year, we identified some where we funded not only design, but construction, and others, like these, we only funded the design portion. Like Center Street, we didn't, I think we called it active transportation.
Yes.
Yes.
And we just set aside dollars, because again, we were kind of in this mode, like some of the project we're talking about today, we want to have an active transportation facility connector, but we didn't know exactly how we would do it. But we have now brought the consultant on. We've spent a lot of time talking about the Center Street, the Lehigh Loop Phase 2. So we have now done some of the work, the design work ahead of time, which that was all that was funded in the 2020 Mesa Moves program.
okay, so this will be,
So now we're bringing them forward and saying, okay, now the next phase, well, there wasn't money to do the actual construction and development of those projects.
I did cut out a section of our overall system map for trails and parks because we want to, where we can, tie these together. In Northeast Mesa, we have an area from about Brown and Ellsworth, or the 202, up to Recker and Thomas, up where the Mountain View Trail is being built, that we need to look at making some connections in this area. And I specifically highlighted an area, Red Mountain Park is in there, but as part of the deal back in 1988, we entered into a lease with the Bureau of Land Management. So across the canal on the east side, there's a 140-acre parcel that's pretty much desert today that we have the lease on for a very long time. So we looked at that and how we would connection that into the trail systems and how we might use it as more of a passive recreational park where we can do paths and trails. We've also kind of identified a couple of areas on the northern side where we might look at more of a playground park area, still maintaining the desert character of the site. And then to the south, there's an area that currently we have a very avid remote hobby group that works and that plays out of Chrisman and Elliott. And we think this would be a really good spot for them to move to, and they could have their own area, some better parking in the area. So you can see to the south, we kind of penciled in some space for remote hobby. RC cars, planes, you see them all the time out at Chrisman and Elliott if you're out driving along Elliott. So these are kind of just some possibilities we looked at for this site since we own it. And then it does tie into the trail systems and the paths that we talked about with RJ.
so this is, for this, what's being proposed for the bond is just this park.
Well, and really what we're just suggesting, here's a whole system, and we would kind of, want to get a feel from the community, we visit with you and others, and just say, hey, does this make sense? We just thought there was a great opportunity to kind of take all this property that we've had available to us to develop for years and start kind of coming up with some concepts of how we could connect all the way from Brown and the 202, all the way up to Thomas and Recker through some system. Now, it's not going to all happen in one bond program, but at least kind of start getting a definition of the concept where the trails connect to parks, and then they just kind of move their way up to the top, just trying to use this property that's just sitting undeveloped and do something with it. So we're just giving some ideas about, well, how could we create these trailheads, these little respites, these park areas along the way as you moved up to the north part of the city.
Yeah, I think keeping that as a park, that a significant amount of acreage, as
it
a
is.
park is probably, we'll get positive feedback, but I think as I've talked to all of you about, what I get the most from constituents in this area is that those off-street trails and paths, and that they connect, that people can ride along and get to different places, whether it's a park like this, which is great, or a rec center or a school. So having it shown how it's connected to a path or a trail that people can get is important, and I think will be looked at positively.
Mayor, Councilmember Goforth, real quick, I know we've got a long agenda, but if you're looking at, there's the previous slide, Beth, where you see Thomas Road. You might be aware, Councilmember, that we did apply for a design assistance grant through MAG to look at that specific area. We did not get selected, but more recently, they have what are called closeout funds, which are funds that become available that other cities can't spend, and we did receive dollars. So we are kicking off a design study for that specific area.
Which, the one in Brown?
Thomas and
Oh, sorry,
Recker.
I mean the dotted, the
Yes,
brown?
the dotted, yes, yeah.
Is it the dotted brown or is it Thomas
Or
from
the
Power
blue.
to Higley? Which one is it?
It is Thomas Road from Power to Higley.
Oh, okay.
So
It's
the
that
like,
green
across.
dash.
It's the green from.
Yeah.
East-west line.
I think
Okay.
the orange is the one with flood control. Am I saying that correctly? Yes.
That would be with that Andrea.
Or, yeah, CAP or
It-
flood control. That's that
Okay.
conversation I had about.
Okay.
There's the distinction, I don't bore people with our bureaucracy, but the trail system
Right.
is maintained
Yeah.
by parks, and then transportation
And so
maintains
is that-
the improved paths.
Those
Sorry.
MAG dollars from Thomas to Higley, is that still the same concept
Yes.
of the, okay.
But I've asked that you be included in the
That would be
conversation
great,
as we move
thank
through
you.
that.
Ms. Duff?
Okay.
I have to say more about transportation and trails and such, that we have a lot of conversation about promoting an active lifestyle, but we don't talk really about pathways for transportation uses. And I think at some point, somehow, we need attention. I know I've talked about this for years. That in our transit and low-income area of our city, south of Maine, between Country Club and Mesa Drive, Stapley. If you look at the previous slide,
Gonna go
where
back
it
to-
shows the trails and path system, and it has the bike lanes.
There we go.
And if you look at that area between Country Club and Stapley and like south of Maine, which is our heavy transit corridor, because we have light rail, buses and such, and it is a low-income area. And we have the most number of households that have 0 to 1 car. We really lack on having safe bike lanes, and I know we've talked about it street by street, and there's always issues why we can't do it. But maybe through our study, Safe Streets for All, or somehow, we need to address this. Otherwise, we continue to have high pedestrian bike fatalities. We're not equitable in being able to address the needs of our citizens that need, that depend on street safety, walking and biking, to access transit, to access their jobs, to access their home, to go to the grocery store. We need to somehow do something with this void, and we won't even get into shade, because that's another thing. But I'll just bring it up since we're still on looking at this recreationally, to look at it as a transportation system too. Thank you.
Before we leave this slide, I'll just say that yesterday I was out at the Haas Trail and Usury Park, and those facilities are already they're at capacity. As soon as you put in any kind of a desert trail type of a facility, you'll have cars parked on the highway adjacent to it. So the idea that we've got this 150 acres or so that we're
140.
renting from BLM and it's not being utilized, I think that's a lost opportunity. It will, as Mr. Freeman said, if we build it, they will come. Or if we just, put a gate up and tell people they can park there and start using it, it'll be busy. So I'll just add that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Okay. So moving along to aquatics, we are in need of some additional aquatic facilities. We are looking at the Red Mountain campus to build an aquatic center to replace Fremont Pool. It'd be a regional pool, as well as in our far southeast at Eastmark High School. We are in need of a regional pool in that area.
And as Mayor knows this, and Councilman know this, we've had several conversations, even as Eastmark High School was being built, about working with the school district and putting a pool there. And the area's been identified, and so that has been kind of a top priority in the future, to identify an opportunity to create a pool out there. So that's why that's on the list.
Thank you for bringing that. Gosh dang it. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Are we starting to work on an IGA with a school, or
We've
how do
had
you want to time
conversations
that?
with them. I mean, I don't know, Andrea,
Andrea?
how far you've had those conversations. I think they're kind of waiting to see what our commitment is, so.
The reason I mean, Eastmark not just Eastmark, but that school district has had trouble passing bonds.
Well, this is just their land.
Yeah, and well as their operating budget, right? So they've had some troubled elections recently, or
Mayor, Councilmember Summers, the discussion we've had is to mirror where we're going with the Mesa Public Schools Aquatics Partnership, which is for the city to operate and maintain and cover utilities, and then to charge the school as they need use of it. So if they have aquatics
Right.
teams that need to be in the pool, they would pay for that usage, rather than covering utilities, which is the old paradigm with Mesa Public Schools year-round. It's focused on the school use.
okay.
And so they have the land set aside up against Point 22, north of the ball fields. That's about 2.5 acres for an aquatics facility, and that's what we've been talking through. So we have started the conversation, and we're waiting to see if this becomes a priority for a bond program.
Okay, that's fantastic, and as long as, I hope they remain willing partners. I just want us to think, if for some reason it falls through, where might we put this? So that becomes a more difficult discussion to have.
Right.
Can I add to that? I think it needs to go at Eastmark High School. I mean, it's an amenity for the high school,
Yeah.
High schools have swim teams. And
Agreed.
so if it's not there, it's going to be putting kids in a bus and taking them to wherever else it's going to be. And I'll just get on my soapbox for 2 seconds. The aquatics program that the city of Mesa has is one of the best reasons to live in Mesa, Arizona. And right now, that whole southeast, part of Mesa is not able to participate in that because of the lack of a facility. So they really are, there's a double standard. We need to get a swimming pool out in that part of town. And the other thing I'll say is I've been coming to meetings in this room for a long time, and for the whole time I've been coming here, people have been saying the Fremont pool is bad and we need to fix it. We need to replace it. So sometimes you forget about that Fremont pool because it's so hard to see, and that's part of the problem. Nobody knows it's there, and when they do find it, they're disappointed because it's not a good facility. So these are both, this is not extravagant. This is not expanding our program beyond, where it's already at. It's offering the program to almost a third of our city and replacing a pool that's badly in need of being replaced.
Mayor, that is our oldest pool from 1976.
Yeah.
Mayor, and I agree with you completely, because
Yeah.
the last time I think we did a bond election, I think we had a pool in similar disrepair that I said, just looking at the photos required that I get a tetanus shot. It was that bad. And I also was very much in support of Skyline receiving a pool, because we didn't have one in the district in Southeast Mesa, but that pool was stolen by Councilmember Goforth in the last redevelopment, but we've had significant growth down to the south. So I'm absolutely in favor of Eastmark High School's location. That's where we've identified it. My fears that I hope we can come up with an agreement in IGA that works for both sides and we can proceed forward. That's my only concern.
I agree.
But that's the right spot.
Yeah.
And based on what you said, my question, the Red Mountain would be at the high school?
No,
Or
at the
park?
Councilmember Goforth, it'd be at the park. There's,
okay.
inside the loop that goes into Red Mountain Center, there's a dirt lot. It would be in that location.
So really
Okay.
begins, that whole
Yeah.
area becomes a consolidated, massive recreation complex with everything
Yeah.
there. It's not the lake. We're not converting the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
They go to Fremont now.
Okay.
Thank you.
So moving on into new parks and some lands that we have available. Starting in the upper left, Lehigh Sports Complex we built. As part of that, we acquired some property right on the north side of that we'd like to turn into a neighborhood park. Chrisman and Elliott, we have the basins. There's drop-in play mostly today, but we'd like to put some more formal soccer fields there and move the remote hobby over to the other location on McKellips. Mountain Adobe is land that we own. And I believe the master plan, Andrea, states that you need about an additional 20 acres of land in West Mesa today. So we would also be looking to see where, because land is not readily available in that part of town, we would be watching for properties to come up with the hope of acquiring additional land and setting it for future parks.
Is there anything we could do with some, in West Mesa, especially like Broadway to Riverview Park? I think that's a dearth of very little open space that we have. West of Alma School. And I don't know, there is retention basins, or is there anything to do with these retention basins that, not a formal piece, but added features like soccer goal posts or pieces that, I know the use of retention bases for floods, but, I think for the most part, it's a good thing we don't have a lot of, flooding or these pieces, but, so is there anything there that we could use for like just added value pieces that we can add to some of these retention basins or parks that can be utilized or are currently utilized for practices and other pieces by local folks that live there? So just a question out there.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, the retention basins, there aren't that many in that particular
There's
part of
not,
town.
yeah.
And we do keep amenities out of the basin areas that flood. And if we have shelves at a higher elevation, we're able to put amenities there. But this targeted area is where we don't meet the 10-minute walk to a park.
Yeah.
And there are no HOA facilities that provide that opportunity either. So that would turn to land acquisition, possibly school grounds, those types of things that we're looking at, and whether that would address that gap. But basins in general, the 10-minute walk goal is to have 5 amenities within a 10-minute walk, and that we're more like 65% of the city meets that. And so we are trying to identify types of amenities that make sense. But it is tough just on basins because we don't want to create an entrapment where there'd be sitting water.
Sure. Okay.
But we'll keep, that's why we've
Yeah,
kind of
it's
put a big
the
circle in this area is
Mm-hmm.
to look for those opportunities. Okay.
And everybody's favorite, pickleball courts. So you get a lot of requests for these, I think, don't we, Andrea?
We do.
And so our park staff have identified several parks that could use pickleball courts. So you see those on the list.
There's none in District 6.
You have one.
I'm getting one, yeah.
No, yeah.
So
Monterey Park.
in the slide coming up about to Ray, Augusta Ranch, there's renovate existing playgrounds. And so if there's Augusta Ranch has reached out to me with some
there it is.
interest in pickleball, just FYI.
Thank you.
So Augusta.
I'm intrigued with the putting one at Evergreen. As you know, that's a park that's challenged. That's a park I grew up going to as a kid, which is a good indication of how old it is. But putting a pickleball court there might be a shot in the arm. Right now, it's a rough spot.
Mayor, yeah, correct. Like the pickleball courts that we added to Kleinman Park have really activated Kleinman.
Kleinman's
And that
really become a
is
busy place now.
why we're
Yeah.
looking at Evergreen. There's space there next to the basketball courts
Yeah.
for pickleball.
Yeah, pickleball activates the parks. It brings people in, so.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm saying I hadn't thought of that before, but that's a very intriguing idea.
We could call it the Giles Pickleball Court.
No, we couldn't.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
I'll just add,
Yeah.
I'll add a comment. I know this is in a historic neighborhood, the Evergreen Historic Neighborhood, and they might have some pushback there, and parking is a premium there as well. But it is it's a deserved area for a pickleball court. I know I got lobbied last night. Hey, when are you going to put in 18 more pickleball courts?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's what they want.
that's what they
But
want.
we're trying to spread the love across the
Yeah.
city here, so.
Yeah.
Well, if you build it, they'll come. I've
Yes.
heard that before.
Somebody once said that, right? Okay, so irrigation systems, we've got parks with aging irrigation systems. We'd like to upgrade those parks, put in water controllers that help us conserve water, reduce the amount of water we need for our parks, and part of our water use it wisely push. So,
I'm sorry, I can't help it. You know, ornamental turf is something that I think we need to get away from. And I think, obviously, the reason we have parks is so people can go there and experience grass and let their dogs and their kids, you know, run around on the grass. So I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I wonder if we can look at some of our parks and say, you know, let's have, where there's turf, it's turf, but if it's really not, you know, if it's a part of the park that we're spending a ton of money on watering, but there's really, people aren't utilizing it for recreational turf purposes.
Yeah.
That might be an
And
opportunity.
that certainly is a possibility. We've come to you with those grants to kind of take those edges to do that non-functional turf conversion. But you're also going to see, we just kind of finalizing, each year we come to you with projects that support the climate action plan. And one of the areas we want to do is water conservation. So we've actually identified, not necessarily in parks, so that's a good place, but there's a lot of city facilities that have ornamental grass. It's just not, it's only there for looks. It doesn't have any function. So actually, we're going to propose spending some dollars to focus on those areas and converting those also to something not water necessary. So there's a lot of places we can do it, whether it's the parks or city facilities. We think the opportunity outside of city facilities also is a way for us, the city, to demonstrate, you know, being better stewards of water usage. And so we're going to bring some of those proposals to you in the near future also.
And arguably, we'd be saving money, right?
Yeah,
Because we're
absolutely.
not
Yeah,
mowing
no, no.
it and we're not watering
Yes,
it.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so we'll look at the parks, but we're also going to show you opportunities where we have grass around some of our own city facilities that we need to change out.
If I could add, Mayor, we're looking at, for these locations, reducing turf by about 20% as part of the irrigation system upgrades. So these are 4 locations where we're running irrigation 24 hours a day in the hottest part of the summer because we can't get enough water pressure and water stations to get water down to the quantity to sustain the landscaping, trees, turf, all of that. And so these are to upgrade so we can get to a water window of 6 hours overnight, but also to reduce turf by 20%. So that these are also highly played locations, but we're keeping the turf where drop-in soccer, baseball, kids coming out throwing frisbees are concentrated and taking the turf away from the edges.
Great, you were already ahead of me. Thank you.
okay, and then all around the city, we have playgrounds that are aging. We need to renovate the existing playgrounds. You see all the parks that our park staff have listed on this slide, and they're pretty much all over the city. So now moving on, my museum.
Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
Before we leave that, one of our neighborhood parks in District 1, the Harris Park Basin, we scratched that because of it costs overrun. Can we, Mr. Brady, consider that again as part of?
Well, I think it was more than just cost overrun. I think it was just the practicality of that basin, right? Help me with Andrea.
It is, that basin doesn't have a shelf that stays up above where the retention is. And so the high cost was as a result of building a shelf and going deeper on the basin because it wasn't built to be able to accommodate that. Some of the other basins are from the get-go, but it's not set up to be able to do that without major land work.
Let's revisit that because there is a shelf there where currently the retention is down below the existing shelf. So I think part of it was the construction from the street level back over to the shelf because the retention and the drainage there was around it. So could we just revisit that?
We've studied it pretty heavily, but yes, we can talk about it some more.
Let's talk about it some more.
Okay.
Because I know before the construction costs really pushed it over than what we anticipated.
Yeah, but it was because of the
The major earthwork is
earthwork that
required.
needed to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just inflation or construction, it was making it happen.
Thank you.
Okay.
On this subject, before we move on, I just put a shout out for looking for opportunities to increase shade, whether from a shelter or from trees,
Sure.
planting trees and such like that. And it'll help, I think, with the longevity of some of the equipment that are exposed to the sun. Thank you.
The other, I echo the shade piece, but also when you look at renovating existing playgrounds, can we look at ways to activate like the whole family, maybe adults too? No, I've been out to playgrounds and, parents just sit down at the bench and, look at their kids, and if there's like exercise equipment or some other tools around it that you can activate the whole family along with the kids, I think is a cool aspect to just changing up, just maybe adding just the normal kids, slides or swings, but adding other features that can activate maybe adults or other folks that are, sitting around. So just a thought.
Yeah, but then they're not watching their kids.
Yeah, that becomes problematic.
General vicinity, I would say,
Yeah.
of where the kids are playing, I think.
Sure.
Makes sense.
All right.
Okay, so we're now going to leave parks, and we're going to talk about educational and cultural experiences in our city, because we have needs in these areas as well. And our museums and library staff have been patiently waiting for their moment here. So we're going to talk first about libraries. We have several needs. I mentioned it earlier with the Central Mesa Community Center. We have an opportunity to combine it with a library of some type. We've proposed a branch library in this area, as well as a potential Mesa Express library in the north part of the city, another MEL like we put at Monterey, but a little bit bigger. As well as Red Mountain Library needs to have the children's area refreshed in a big way and make it a place where children are comfortable and they have freedom to voice themselves in an area of the library with a welcoming entrance and digital and sensory literacy. So those are big on Polly's list of things, and they come a lot from her master plan and the work that's been already done with the community.
Ollie, don't take the lack of questions on this as any lack of support. Okay.
Okay. So moving on into museums, both the IDEA and the Arizona Museum of Natural History are in need of some refreshing. We have a current project at the IDEA Museum that we're getting ready to embark upon construction to complete before the end of the year, but there are other needs at the museum. And of course, the Museum of Natural History, some of those buildings date back to the 30s. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done just on the infrastructure of the three buildings, as well as bringing this museum up to quality educational facility for the public. So, and both Jared and Simon are here if you have any questions on those.
Really quick, going back a slide, and I'm sorry because I was talking for a second, so I will admit that. But did you mention a location for the Mesa Express Library North?
We have not identified a location. We would like to, and maybe Polly wants to come up here.
I wanted Polly to have a turn up.
Yeah, she needs to come up. We really have looked at different parks, so I'll let Polly.
And that wouldn't be, like, if we did the Central Mesa Library, then we wouldn't do that? Or, I mean, this is something we want to do in conjunction with it?
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and council members, and Councilmember Spilsbury. To your question about what we would do, that's really what we're looking for feedback on. The Mesa Express Library has proved popular. It's a concept that has, we anticipate is going to continue to evolve. That's one reason that we have anticipated higher square footage for this location. But right now we're looking more in the north central to western part of the city. We do know, and we believe what's proved successful with this location was putting this in a park with a lot of active experiences surrounding it. So schools, we have in Monterey Park with pickleball courts, with the sports complex, and we have the Tot Lot Playground, also Monterey Park Playground. So we know that that active experience is really added to the value of the library in that location, and we're looking to replicate that in North Mesa, North Central.
So the usage of our current Express Library that we opened is proving to be something that people want to use.
I was there on Monday, and within a period of about 2 hours, we probably had 40 to 50 people inside and outside, either using the space or using the space surrounding the library. One thing that they are asking for is more amenities and more programs, and with a library the size of, the intention was really for it to be a drop-in self-service library. But we are finding that there is more interest in programs, and we don't have space for programs at that location, so that's something we need to consider.
Can we add a room to it or something? Like a community room? Is it not that easy? No. There's lots of land around there.
We just cut the ribbon.
Well, I mean, so, yeah, I know. But that's, I guess that's my point, is like, if it's getting used, then, so maybe we add a community room to the one if we're gonna build it north. So we're thinking more west.
Again, we're trying to manage the scope of the project and keep the costs so we can put these in the parks without overwhelming the park,
Okay.
but being mobile. But, you know, yeah, it'll be great, right? It'd be great to do branch libraries everywhere, but this was just our way of trying to provide the facilities. One of the things that's very popular, that's not in this picture, are the lockers, the book lockers, so that people enjoy that. So it's a balance, right? We're trying to accommodate some of the needs, but we can't get to all the needs without building a branch library, but those are expensive. I mean, we're struggling right now with the most recent branch library that we are trying to get done in Southeast Mesa. I mean, the cost of nearly doubled from the pricing that we had when we came out. So it's just, and I think from a priority standpoint, Polly, the Central Mesa Library branch, which would be on that same location, at least what we've identified, would serve a huge area and provide a great need out in that area, so.
Right. If you, and Mr. Brady mentioned this earlier, and I believe Beth did too, if you look at a map of Mesa, and with the Gateway Library coming online, you see our service area is fairly well covered. We have a 3-mile service radius, but that area in Central Mesa is not. And there is a gap there, and that's what we'd like to bridge the service gap and make sure that all of Mesa has the same access to the same resources and programs that the rest of Mesa does.
So when we go to the public to get input, would we have a more pinpointed location for a Mesa Express
We'd probably
Library North?
identify the areas.
An
around it.
area?
Yeah.
Okay.
But we would take suggestions, though. I mean, what people would
Right.
tell us, but it has to be a part, I guess we could maybe have a few examples that we could share in that north area, but it has to be, kind of meet the criteria that Polly's talking about, and I think we identified a few
We did.
already.
We
I mean,
looked
is
at it.
somewhere like Riverview work for that, or you'd want it further east than that?
East of-
But more west than the Central Mesa Library
And
location?
frankly, from a capacity standpoint, I think it may come down to, are we gonna do a branch library, or do we do
Okay.
a couple of mills?
And more in like a neighborhood,
Right.
like, okay.
Right.
I have museum questions, but you have more
Just
library,
one-
okay.
And that's what, I just questioned the Central Mesa Library branch model, if that's something that maybe we think about that large of a footprint there, or, you know, spread out maybe 2 or 3 of these express libraries too. Because in that branch library, you already have the other amenities there with the rec center. Just wondering if that's the best kind of utilization of our like library components.
It's just the trade-off, right? You
Sure.
have very limited programming in
Yeah.
a mill. It really is kind of drop in, pick up the book. And the demand, I think the libraries have done such an incredible job with programming where parents can bring the kids and sit down for a story time or another activity. It's really hard. I mean, the mills are just tight. So I think that's the trade-off. In some reasons, that's why the branch is maybe ideal, because we have such a huge area where we don't have the opportunity to provide those kind of programs.
Sure.
So, yeah, it's a trade. I mean, 3 mills still isn't equal to a branch.
Sure.
Right? So I think that's the challenge we have.
Yeah.
But it is a convenient way to get into a community.
Yeah.
Where we can't do a full program branch.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if, you know, if we're seeing on the express side, just a lot of activity and movement, if it makes sense as a new kind of way to rethink of maybe building more quantity to have in different spots and filling these gaps, then a branch library component in this area. Still add something there, but
No, yeah.
just maybe quantity that it is maybe a little bit, as lessons learned with the Monterey piece, a little bit bigger, but not as big, you know, to add pieces. I would love one at Riverview per se.
Oh.
You know, as far as the express library, right? Because you already have the activity.
Yeah, no, it's
a lot of, you have some developments happening there, in streetcar potentially, if, you know, in the future. So there's some potential of further activation there. But just a thought, if that branch library model is maybe not outdated, but it maybe rethinking of a smaller space that where we can add maybe another express library somewhere else, so.
And Mayor Giles, Vice Mayor Heredia, to build on what Mr. Brady said as well, something to consider and that we found is that our service radius for libraries, for the Express Library, it's a smaller radius because there's not the number of resources available. So that means the area that you're serving does shrink down a little bit. They're definitely, we're finding, you know, they're a great way to serve a very specific purpose in a neighborhood, but to truly meet a larger need, having a branch library would serve that region a little bit better. And the idea of potentially co-locating with a community center would add that enrichment value where you can treat the whole person, kind of like what you were mentioning with families and at parks. You have a variety of experiences, resources on that or in that space where a branch library would work really well, but there's still that value in other outlying areas or neighborhoods that an express library could serve the same or a right purpose too. Sorry, great purpose.
What is like an ideal ratio for a library? Like how many people to one library?
That's a great question.
I just was realizing I don't really know what other cities have.
That is in our former master plan. So it is a very interesting formula. How it was developed, I'm not sure. There is a formula for public library development use, and it is, I believe, a square foot per 0.86 capita. So for a city the size of Mesa, they look at square footage for services because square footage equals the number of services you can provide, collection size, programming. So for our population, it might be, if I remember the calculation.
Yeah, get the calculator.
It was around 480,000 square feet, I believe, and that is just a general practice. We know that, you know, there's a lot of variables that go into that, but that is the standard.
And what are we at?
We're way below it.
Way below.
Yeah, we're probably,
Like
About
half?
200
Half
and
below.
yeah, we're maybe half.
And that's about 430,000 square feet. Yeah,
You were really close. Okay. So obviously going off of maybe like a model like that is proof or, you know, good data to go off of that we need more too, even though we know that just by living life. But okay. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank you.
You want to do your museum spiel now?
Let's do museums.
Yeah.
So Jared and Simon are both here to help me out.
Okay, well, Jared's gone. Okay.
Oh, Jared's gone? Oh, well, Richard's going to have to come join.
Yeah.
She's not asking any hard questions. She's
No,
just
I'm
gonna-
not. I'm really not, and I'm kind of going to ask the same question. I can keep repeating. But, so I know that both of the museums have much more detailed plans and ideas than what we're seeing in this box right here. So what will be presented to the public at these information meetings to help them understand like what the vision is for these museums?
Well, Councilmember Spilsbury and council members, the plan is for us to focus on the programming and the educational impact that both museums have on the communities and the neighborhoods in total. So we will be focusing on how programming combines with infrastructure and how the infrastructure, whether it's inside our walls or out, serves the community.
Okay. And so are we going to be showing some of the
Yes.
dreams we have?
Counselor, I think in fairness, because we know Jared's been, and we've been working on plans for redoing the Idea Museum for some time.
Yeah.
And really, we're into phase one, and we know we weren't able to get all of the full phase, everything we want to do, so we kind of created another phase two.
Right.
But the good news is, at least from the Idea Museum, I think the visuals about specifically what we're looking at will be readily available. Now, on the Natural History Museum, Simon's doing a great job of beginning the process to create that visioning. And Simon, you want to talk a little bit about but as far as, where he is versus Idea Museum, it's a little different. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on different, good morning, Giles, good morning, council members, Councilmember Spilsbury. Yeah, we are in a very early stage here, but we've done a lot of work to get to this point. Actually, in about 3 weeks, we actually start our museum master planning, which is a huge investment by the city. We're working with one of the best museum consultants in the world. It was a highly competitive bid. And in about 6 months, we will have a full report. What that will give us the business case and business plan for a world-class museum over the next 25 years, focusing heavily on a sustainable city-owned enterprise. We know that we make huge contributions to the city as well as the region and the state. As Richard was talking about, we've refocused tremendously of taking an incredibly well-resourced city asset into the community. So I think those are really important talking points, collaborating with Polly in the libraries, working in the courts, bringing families together, redoing our syllabus to deal with science literacy within high schools. We're now out in Title I schools, live streaming into our labs with scientists. So over the past year, we've really moved our focus outside of the walls of the museums and actually listening to our community, which want the museums in their neighborhoods. So that's been a really big focus of us, is really having more representation, serving our community like that. So the exciting part is the museum planning stage. There will be a midpoint report on that, which will go back to city management. And we will be able to sort of paint a pretty great future for our continued investment in a world-class museum. I think we all know here that investing in our cultural tapestry is a good economic decision. We're investing in future generations here of prosperity, healthy communities. And I think one of the things that's really important with natural history museums is societal cohesion. So in our revisioning and our strategic plan, our focus is now to be a hub of discovery, which is creativity, which is our department is all about, our creative enterprise. Discourse, we need to be a place where we as a community can talk about things that might be tough sometimes, but we're a rich, diverse group of people living in the city of Mesa, so we will be that place. And the last thing, which is everything about all the plans we have, is positive action. We want to empower our community to be positive citizens to themselves and to each other. So that's the focus of this museum, and that's what the museum plan will do.
And just real quickly, so that's what I love about Simon. He can talk like that, and I can't.
Can he go to every single meeting?
For sure.
But so from the practical standpoint, I think it's important to have the museums out there, and especially even the Natural History Museum, out in the community dialogue right now, even if it's still just in the planning stage, because we need to introduce this concept and get people thinking about it. Now, we may very well still come to council and say, it's an older facility. There are some very basics of the facility, whether it's plumbing, electrical, roof, that we could maybe start to do now while Simon's still bringing along the bigger vision. But sometimes those aren't as elegant and, you know, people get excited about, but if they hear that this could help us lead to another vision that will come later, so this is kind of the beginning stages
Okay.
of laying
Whereas the Idea
foundation.
Museum, we
Is
have
further
pictures
along
to
with the
show us.
specific, programming space, right, that we'll see.
Yeah, in Los Angeles with the Natural History, that was a 10-year project and the scope grew. And at the very, very beginning of it, it's kind of like what the public don't see. Huge investments in infrastructure, future-proofing the facility to be able to deliver these experiences. The really super cool, fun part of that is, for us, is that it enables us as a museum to start experimenting, meaning creating experiences in the museum, testing ideas, engaging the community, seeing what they want, what they don't want. So even though we're talking about, you know, new plumbing and electrical and stuff, server rooms, it's actually a really, really fun, thriving part of the beginning of a very long game for natural history museums as they rethink themselves. So we're talking about 10 years. We're talking about a legacy investment. We're actually talking about a lot of fun for our community. So it's just, as Mr. Brady was saying, we are just at the beginning of that.
Well, thank you. I mean, as has been said, I think we all know that these museums in their current form are gems of our community and that have so much more potential. And like you said, world-class. I think the mayor said that for the first time in one of our sessions that we had. But that's the vision and the future. And so I guess I know that arts and culture is really important to our Mesa community, and it has just so much benefit to the quality of life, and that I care so much about for our city. And so I just want to really make sure our messaging and pictures and whatever our vision is very explicitly displayed or talked about. I don't know what the format of these meetings are going to be, but I want to make sure our community can catch that so that they will be on board with voting for it.
It'll be very immersive and experiential.
Okay.
Yes, it will. So, and just going to give some credit here, that's Simon's artwork on the slide.
Oh.
Original artwork.
That's his original artwork.
That's what it's going to
So,
look like.
if you need him to sign it afterwards, I'm sure he's available.
More to come.
So yes, we do plan on, these will be, I'll talk about it in a minute, but open house format with boards. If you need some of these folks to come talk at meetings that you're having or other events you're attending, please ask. We'll get somebody out to talk and bring along graphics, but they're planning a very immersive engagement.
They just need to have a really beautiful accent.
Okay.
So that would help.
My wife will be mad at me if I don't add something to the museum thing. Mr. Brady, I unfortunately was out of town on Saturday and I missed I Love Mesa Day. And apparently,
Oh, it was huge.
we had lines wrapped around the buildings
There
at
were
these museums,
over
right?
3,400 people that had access to the Idea Museum that would not have otherwise had access on free admission day, I Love Mesa Day, and over 4,400 at the Natural History Museum. So it was just a robust success.
That's great. So obviously, these are, as Julie was saying, beloved institutions. And I think the vision we all have is to take these facilities that are very utilized, very loved by our community, and move them from the good to the great category. And the way to do that, obviously, is through these bonds. But we're going to have to explain to the community why they passed a bond for the Idea Museum several years ago, and nothing has been spent on it yet.
Oh, no, but
We're getting ready to sign the contract now.
Good, all right. I'm just saying.
It's coming.
When I have these conversations, sometimes people say, wait a minute, I thought I just did a bond for the Idea Museum, and I haven't seen anything happen.
It was a very small bond.
Yes,
I'll point
I know,
out. And we have a lot of infrastructure needs in that building. One of the struggles we're having is getting HVAC equipment timely. So we think we got that worked out this week, and we're
So
moving on.
we need to tell the story, because that's a very old grocery store.
Oh, it's very old.
And, but it's young in comparison to the Natural History Museum.
Yes,
Right?
it is.
And so I think we need to help people realize there's some basic expensive infrastructure problems with those buildings.
That's what we're dealing with.
And that's got to be part of the messaging. At what point do we get to actually, upgrading the buildings as opposed to just maintaining two very, very old
So
buildings?
as we're going in and doing these improvements, that's what we're doing, right? We have to. We have to, and that's what we're talking about. With the Idea Museum, part of the challenge of the amount that was set aside in the bond was very inadequate for what we
Yes.
needed. And so we've had, the city's general fund has stepped up significantly to cover some of those costs, so we can at least open up the phase one, or start the phase one of the project. But along the way, phase two will again be having to address more just infrastructure, building infrastructure along with that. The city's committed to continue to invest the general fund in flooring and
HVAC, plumbing,
so it's not coming out of the
electrical.
bonds. So, and then that's probably what we're going to be looking at the Natural History Museum, is recognizing, let's go work on the bones, the infrastructure of the building. So as Simon's building the vision, then we can bring the vision out to the public and talk about that. So, yeah, we're trying to address all these. Like to your point, Mayor, these are old buildings. They weren't built for these kinds of uses and the way we're programming it. So we've had to really step back and try to reimagine how we're doing this.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so thank you for letting us take 2 hours of your morning. We really appreciate it. We need this dialogue, and we need you out with our community, helping us with the dialogue as we go out to speak with them shortly. So what's next? Well, today we're having our open dialogue with council. Anna's prepared to begin a social media outreach to the public through March 18th through April 3rd. We are going to be meeting in every district over a 2-week period from April 3rd to April 17th. So some very busy schedules. Open house format. All of the departments you see sitting behind me are ready to come be there to engage with our public and find out what they want. And we'll have graphics and boards. Hope to have a few kiddo activities so that parents coming home picking up their kids can maybe stop into and have time to visit, and their kids can be engaged in other things. So we're working on some of that as well. We will have online engagement from March 15th to April 24th. We are going to put that all back together, go have a conversation with Mr. Brady, and then come back to you and have some discussions in May along with costs. We are working on costs now, but as Mr. Brady said, we want to kind of narrow this down a bit so we aren't trying to cost the whole world. That's just very difficult to do. So, and as I said earlier, the call for election day would be June 3rd. So that's kind of the schedule for us right now. This is just a list of the in-person engagement for all of the districts starting April 3rd. We have set those up so that they are on your calendars, and if you're available to attend, please do. Come help us have the conversations and gather the information. Our infrastructure is only as good to our community as what they want. So we need some dialogue and we need some help. This is the QR code and the link for the online engagement. So if you can't come, or even if you have other thoughts after you leave or in preparation for coming, please go online and interact with this. It will be active on Mondays. So if you go on like right now, it's probably not going to be active, but you can't get to the pages. But it's Anna set it up so that we can have an online dialogue with folks in our community. And then I think I'm done, unless you have any more comments. Mayor, you can turn off the DeLorean.
Thank you. Now's the time for
now.
questions, apparently.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
I have a
Yes.
question. So after all the engagement and the feedback, you will, because as Mr. Brady has said numerous times, we can't possibly do all of these.
No.
We're not going to. So you will come back with a very narrowed, specific list.
I think we'll come back with, I think last time we did a bond program, we said, the staff just said, here's kind of like, whether, and council can change this, right? We're going to say, maybe here's how we decided what created priority, right? Is it phase, is already designed, that's been completed? Is it part of a master plan? I don't know. We're just going to try to come up with something and start visiting with the council, and then come back and have a discussion like this where we kind of show you, okay, here's where we think the total amount available could be for going forward. And again, we'll have to ask that question to council, make sure you're comfortable. And then knowing that dollar amount, whatever it is, then we've got to squeeze the projects into that, the number of projects into that dollar amount. So we'll have that conversation with council. We'll provide you a recommendation, just put something out there for a dialogue, and then we'll, based on what we hear from the community, kind of what the pricing does, what we can fit into it, we're going to try to be diverse, I guess, in the sense of trying to pick from most of these categories. Frankly, you know, we're going to do some community outreach and polling to see what works well. Public safety, transportation are always very popular. They carry those elections. And then we're going to try to bring in a lot of these others that you saw. Pickleball may be the new secret sauce, who knows? But we've got to figure out both what it fits, what the community, what we hear from the community, as well as just kind of like pricing and trying to make sure, again, we wanted to have projects across the whole city. We may not have the same kind of project across the whole city, but I think we've always tried to manage an opportunity to have some projects throughout the city.
Yeah, but some of the projects, there will be funding from sort of start to finish. I guess what I'm getting at is a little bit kind of what the mayor said about constituents. Didn't we already bond for that?
Yep.
I get that as well. You know, it's kind of confusing. What did we approve?
Right.
I haven't seen any work on it. Then it comes back up, like some of the shared use pass, wasn't that on the one before? So if we could maybe, I get it,
No,
it's not an easy
and
process, but
Councilmember,
if we could
maybe what
have
we
a
should
start
do-
to finish project on the list.
Oh, yeah.
Where
We can do that.
where
Yeah.
constituents can say, yes, I remember that.
We can do that.
It's done.
Maybe
Let's
we
go to
should
the
come
next
back to
one.
and do hey, here's what got done
Yeah.
since the last bond project. Here's the challenge. It's a great point. The difficulty is if it's I'll call it a greenfield a project that hasn't even started with either land acquisition or design to get to construction, that could be a 5-year project, right?
Easily.
And while we're thinking about a 5-year project, we could have other projects where the land isn't an issue, some form of design's already been completed, and so that's how we sometimes do it. And then there's other projects where like, that's a great idea, and sometimes we'll go get design and some of that done, so because whether it's another bond program or sometimes federal dollars become available, and most time federal dollars only go to projects that are past the design phase. But we'll work through that.
Yeah,
I get
yeah.
it. It's a
I'm not saying
challenge
it's
to
easy, for sure.
dialogue, but there's
if
a
it could
reason
be-
for all that.
for sure.
We will definitely have
Somehow we
projects
could
that go
get a
from
little
beginning
bit-
to end.
yeah.
Or certainly projects that you've seen where we've already started the design, where it would be to complete the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to get there. I get it, and we'll have that dialogue, what it looks like.
As
All right.
well as Edison Town.
Well, I'm sorry, I
I'm
apologize.
sorry.
Please go.
When we look at our projects, many times, since our last bond election, we have paid down our existing, whatever. So sometimes it's looking at how much space we have without increasing on property taxes, then that goes into a bigger equation, is, rates and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes looking at that figure, sometimes we can absorb X amount
Right.
within our projects without having any toll on our secondary property tax
Right.
and keeping it maintained.
Yep,
So,
so balancing all those
Yeah.
things, yeah.
All right, let's talk about the rest of this meeting, Mr. Brady.
Okay.
I'd love to not make Irma come back because,
Well, what we'll do, Mayor, is we'll put her PowerPoint, her presentation in the city manager's update today.
talking about Irma's presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's an update on ARPA, where we are with spending down the dollars.
I think we've got 5 or 10.
Oh, you're fine with that?
So
Okay.
if,
Oh, I wasn't sure.
I don't know how long Irma's presentation is.
We can make it as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do it with she can do it in 4 minutes.
Okay. Why don't, Irma, while you're setting up, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come right back. And but I think we probably are going to ask Mr. McVeigh to come back. Jeff, are you here? Yeah, I don't feel bad about asking Jeff to come back. All right, thanks. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, thank you. I think we're ready to reconvene. Irma, thank you for your patience this morning. Looking forward to your presentation.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Irma Ashworth, Finance Director. And I'm going to spend 4 minutes today talking to you about ARPA. And we'll get started. Okay, as a reminder, the ARPA dollars have 4 broad categories that you can spend the money on. The city has dedicated most of the resources on responding to the public health emergency or its negative economic impacts and providing premium pay for essential workers. The other categories are investments in water and wastewater infrastructure and revenue replacement. And I will be talking about revenue replacement at the end of the presentation. 2 important deadlines that I want you to be aware of. December 31st of 2024, which will be here pretty soon, is the deadline that the Treasury has set to have all funds obligated. And what that means, they have to be contracts signed where we are committed to do projects and or receive services. And then the funds have to be spent by December 31st of 2026. Here's a summary of our dollars and our spending. The city received $105.5 million. And as of February 29th of 2024, the city has obligated $79.7 million. And in the Treasury's definition of obligated, this is both what we have spent and then the contracts that we haven't spent dollars on. And of the $79.7 million, we have spent $60.6 million. I'm going to go through the next slides pretty quickly and just hit the high notes because I really want to spend most of our conversation on the projects that we have where we have funds that have not been obligated yet. So in public safety support, we spent $6.2 million through February 29th. Household assistance, $18.1 million. Small business assistance, $13.6 million. Homeless support program, $7.7 million. And then cybersecurity, SCADA infrastructure, $2.7 million. And essential city operations, basically the premium pay for essential workers that was beyond just public safety, was also like water, other essential positions. Okay, the next 3 slides are projects where they have either started or in their beginning phases, or maybe in the middle of the phase, and we still have dollars that we haven't contracted. So the 911 mental health response, the ARPA budget is $4.8 million. Currently, we have a 2.8 that is under contract. That contract ends June 30th of 2024. So we would want 1 more year, so pending new contract that would cover us for another year for the.
So we would it's just telling us that we have a contract that we need to renew, obviously, before the end of June so it takes effect after that.
Correct.
So we'll allocate the dollars for the rest.
Correct. We would just need to update the contract, have it signed before December 31st, and for spending beyond that date as well. The downtown facade improvements and restaurant food business incubator. The downtown facade improvements has a $4.4 million budget. The majority of it is unobligated. Currently, the design contracts are in process, and then after that, the GOC contracts would have to pen. So that's a lot of work that will have to happen between now and, again, December 31st of 2024. The restaurant and food business incubator, the budget on that, $7 million. To date, we spent 1.6. Majority of that was the purchase of the building, and they're finalizing the contract. And Jeff was going to talk about it today, but now he got pushed, so he will give you an update later.
But the good news is, Jeff will be entering into that contract pretty soon, April 1st. So that will fall under that obligated.
Yes.
The one above, we're a little concerned about whether we're going to meet that deadline or not. So just to kind of tease it up for what's coming, right?
Yes.
So keep going.
And it's just obligating the money.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not the design, it's the actual contract, to do it. So we're trying to get to that point.
Yes, we'd have to have the design and the construction contracts signed and committed by December 31st for all the facade improvements. Off the Streets program has a $6.9 million budget. Currently under contract through December 31st, 2024 is 4.8. So before the end of this calendar year, we would have to have a new contract that would carry us from January 2025 through December 31st, 2026. And the emergency shelter facility at 6733 East Main Street has a $12.3 million budget. Currently, $3.8 million has been spent or under contract, like the design phase is under contract, and that leaves about $8.5 million of unobligated. So again, for this project, the construction contract would have to be signed by December 31st, 2024, and obligated.
So that $12 million budget, some of that is money from the county, right? Or is that our budget, or is that the entire budget for the project?
That is just the ARPA budget. So for example, on the 3.8 million that we spent so far, the purchase of the building was part Maricopa County funds and part ARPA dollars.
remember, the cost was more than this.
So only the ARPA dollars are represented here.
Okay, this is City of Mesa ARPA.
That's not the total
Correct.
cost
It
of the
doesn't
building.
include the money from other
Right.
sources.
It was 4
Correct.
million, 4 million?
Thank you.
Maybe, something like that, yeah.
So that's on top of the 12.
Top of the.
Yes.
Yes. It's on top of the 3.8 for the purchase of the building, right?
Okay, revenue replacement. So the Treasury allows the cities to use a standard allowance of up to $10 million for general governmental services. A lot of the municipalities had revenue reductions during COVID, and this was meant to assist them and be able to recover some of that revenue. They had a very complicated formula, and the cities and municipalities, asked for an easier way to be able to calculate it. So what the Treasury decided was that everyone who received funds can have up to a standard allowance of up to $10 million. And you had to take that election April of '22 and tell them, yes, we want to take that option. We requested that option, even though at that point in time, we had no expectation that we would use it, because we had more than enough projects, more than the $105 million that was identified, and we didn't see any reason to do that. Well, now that we're getting down to almost December 31st, and we have some major projects that have not been signed or committed or obligated, that is an option for us to do. So what we would do in that case, you could use it for any general governmental services. Anything that the general fund would normally pay for, you can use that $10 million. So let's use the facade as an example. Let's say that we don't think that we're going to be able to have all those contracts signed by December 31st, and we would then lose that $4 million. Instead, we would take that $4 million and we would use it for general governmental services. Example, we could use it for Parks and Rec, libraries, salaries, or anything else, like I said, that the general fund would pay for. What that does then to the Treasury, we would report, we use the revenue replacement allowance of $4 million. That facade project would come off of my list when I report to the Treasury and when I come to council and give you an update on ARPA. And then the $4 million that was freed up from the general fund then would continue to fund that project. So the project would still happen, but it would happen with general fund dollars that were freed up because we used the $10 million standard allowance for ARPA purposes.
So we gave them our notice that we were considering this, but we've been oversubscribed in projects, right? We've always talked about projects as being an investment that provide a return to the city for the long term. So we never actually have taken this. We've never identified it as a project, but as we're getting very close to this deadline of December of this year of obligating, there's so much, the process by which we have to procure design teams and the contractor can hold some of these projects up for months and weeks. And so what we're proposing to council is, in order to ensure that we do not lose $1 of the ARPA dollars that have already been sent to us, we all currently have, and to make sure we can expend all those dollars, is that we are going to propose that we actually take this standard $10 million revenue replacement to give us a pot of dollars, to give us this cushion that if there are projects that don't get obligated before the end of the year, we'll still have the money to cover it. $10 million, I think, is more than enough, but if it were, if we're short $1 million that doesn't get obligated, well, then we lose that $1 million. And we don't want to do that. So we've only had this in place just in case. It wasn't ever intended to use it as a supplement to the general fund, because we had so many other good projects that we could fund from ARPA. However, it does give us tremendous flexibility if we need it at the end of this calendar year, because for whatever reason a project doesn't get contracted, then by taking this $10 million, using it as a revenue replacement in the general fund, essentially creating a savings count inside the general fund, then we can identify easily $10 million of expenses in the general fund. We'll use the ARPA dollars to cover that cost, and the savings from the general fund, then we'll be able to cover the cost of some of these projects. One of the benefits of doing that is by having a currently ARPA federal project that has all of the strings and oversight attached to it. And I'm thinking facades may be one of those, where it's really difficult to do some of these small little, because the facades really are, how many different facade programs or projects do you have? 18 projects, and trying to use the federal procurement rules is very difficult. It may be easier for us to take that one and just convert it to a general fund project with these savings. So that's the philosophy. We have no intention of using the 10 million to, while tempted, to cover shortfalls in the general fund, because we really committed to all these projects in the ARPA, and we're really squeezing some of these projects because, again, inflation and everything. So that's, when you see us come back next time, you'll see now some of these, you'll see a $10 million revenue replacement, but it's only in order for us to complete the projects that we've already identified under ARPA, and to make sure they do get obligated and expended or completed through the deadline. So that's why we wanted to, we did this in April, but we didn't execute it. We kept waiting and waiting just to see how far we were going to get to the deadline. We're getting really close. We might make it, but we don't want to lose a dollar, right? We just want to make sure we have the ability to cover it. So that's a strategy, and if the council is okay with that, we'd like to begin putting that in place. It's a given. It's the federal, every city gets $10 million of revenue replacement, so it's kind of a nice, I don't know what you call it, very flexible opportunity to cover our cost on some of these projects that are pushing the deadline.
Yes, it's the most flexible area that the U.S. Treasury gave the cities.
So just, can you remind me what obligated, the definition of obligated? So that means it's set in stone, we can't change it type of thing, or what is exactly?
The Treasury defines it as a contract has been signed and we've committed to procure those services or those goods. Doesn't mean that something can't happen later on and it falls through. But they didn't give us a way to replace that. So let's say we have a contract and we have it signed by December 31st. If that falls through, you can't reobligate dollars. Then we lose that.
Okay, so that was my question then.
Yes.
So if something happens to our obligated dollars and
The contractor
yeah,
bails
then
on us.
we're out.
Yes.
We
Like
lost
there's
that money.
okay, and there's no way to really be able to tell which contracts are going to go through,
Yeah.
or putting in like safety nets of making sure we're
Yeah,
obligating.
well, we try to do that, right?
Yeah.
With every contract. And to us, it's more about getting that contract in place, because
Okay.
there's just so much procurement and processes that the feds introduce that we don't typically require of the general fund. And so that puts a lot of time in that effort to
But
make
that's
it
what obligated means, is that there's a signed contract for
right.
that
And
project.
so if we didn't get to a signed contract on some of these projects, the good news is that we use this for revenue replacement, we can come back and make sure they're covered.
So, but what's the likelihood that we'll be able to use all 105 million?
Well, we already spent $60.6 million.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I mean, are we thinking we're going to get pretty close there?
No, the point is, Councilor Spilsbury,
To try to
if
use
we
all
do
of it,
this $10 million
obviously.
replacement, we're going to tell you.
That's a big enough buffer?
We're going to cover, we think we'll
Okay.
easily cover all of
So
the
that
costs.
10 million's a big enough buffer
Yeah,
for.
yes, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's why we highlighted these projects here at the end.
Yes.
Those are the ones we're most concerned about.
'Cause-
And some of them, which, I just lost my PowerPoint, but we think that,
Like right
again, these were the ones that's why we brought these forward, but like the mental health response, we just have to re-sign a new contract. So that takes care of
Okay.
almost $2 million. The facades, we're not sure about that. The incubator program is coming with a contract in April, so I think that'll get knocked out. Off the streets, the emergency shelter facility, we're making sure we're taking care of all the HVAC, all of the infrastructure at that, hotel, and we want to make sure that's right. That's the one I'm concerned about, that may push that December timeframe.
Okay, well, because I didn't go through and like add up any of these, but so with the contracts pending, we're getting closer to that
Yes.
mark for.
Yes,
Yes.
so as of just February 29th, we have $25.7 million that's not obligated.
Okay.
Some of them you can't obligate it because a lot of it is going to, we have Parks and Recs programs, we have arts programs as well that are educational programs or scholarships. You can't obligate that because you're paying someone, right? Or you're giving it to a citizen, so you can't obligate those dollars. So those programs will run through December of 2024.
Okay.
But of the $25 million that's still not under contract or obligated, these 5 that I presented are $23 million of that $25 million. And the largest ones, and if I was going to say which ones I'm the most worried about, is the emergency shelter facility and the downtown facade.
Yeah.
Those would be the 2 that I would be the most worried about of having the contracts in place by then.
And is the emergency shelter facility, is that, what's slowing those contracts down? Like the people that actually can do the work, or?
It's, again, we have to go through following the procurement. We have a design team on board now.
Yes.
They're going through the entire facility. We're having to look at ADA issues. We're having to look at HVAC issues.
So we've already done a lot of that work when, I mean, I know last year when we were approving it, we kind of had talked about what would need to be done, but now just this is more
Now we have to have the
detailed.
design team come in and literally, so that we have a design that we can actually take to a contractor, right? And so I don't know when their work is due for the current design team. But anyway,
Okay.
it's just pushing up against that window. And with this option of taking the 10 million, then we
Then it
think
would
we'll
be
be fine. Yeah.
Of course.
So on the 10 million and the reimbursement of that, does that then have to be done by December 31st of 2026?
Yes, we would have to take that option by
Okay, that
December
is-
31st.
Okay, all right, so we'd still have to meet that deadline.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Is that
That's
everything?
it.
in
That's
her?
it.
Okay.
We just
See,
wanted to bring that, so we're
Okay.
going to move forward with that.
Great.
Notifying Treasury of the $10 million. So.
All right, thank you. We'll
Thank you.
reschedule item 2C and look forward to hearing from Mr. McVeigh more about that downtown restaurant incubator program. Item 3 is to acknowledge receipt of committee minutes. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you, Mr. Summers and Mr. Freeman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, that passes unanimously. Item 4 is current events and conferences attended. Council members, anything you'd like to share with us?
I'll jump in, Mayor.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you. So I really enjoyed NLC and being there. I had the opportunity, I was really humbled to be able to be at the Immigration Roundtable discussion and talked about immigration in our country. I was also able to chair a Public Safety Crime Prevention Committee, and that was really insightful. I can tell you our city is tip of the spear in what we're doing as far as our public safety, our homeless outreach, and the other mental health programs. And then I was able to moderate a discussion on creating a community-centered approach to emergency response services, which is our wheelhouse, and it turned out very well. Then attended a number of meetings and legislative actions. But one thing I was able to do that some of my colleagues weren't able, I was able to stand next to the President of the United States and have my picture taken with him. Yeah, I mean, he even shook my hand, and we shook hands, and it was one-on-one. So our chair of the NLC, Mr. Sander, he had chairs and other board members attend. So it was about 25 of us out of the whole conference. So I felt really privileged with that, and he's a good man, and I respect him. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Who else? Anybody else like to share?
I know, mic drop, like, okay, well, yeah, so we just, I hate not saying anything about NLC, so I got to participate in the Fair Committee, Finance Administration, and Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and I appreciate all the staff members that I texted for questions, and especially on a Sunday, asking questions about some things I was wondering about. And I also attended the Youth and Education and Family Council. And then I also wanted to just mention that that Councilmember Goforth, Duff, Summers, and I were able to go and meet with all of our congressmen and senators and advocate for Mesa and thank them for work that's been done in the past. And that's always a neat experience, and getting to speak up for Mesa with people making decisions. So yeah, we had a great week. Thanks to everyone that helped with that.
Thank you. Ms. Duff?
Yeah, quickly, last Saturday, I was able to attend the I Love Mesa Day. It was fabulous, well-attended, well-organized. Thank you to all the staff that worked so hard. It was like so perfect as far as managing the crowds and having the activities, very activated, very engaged. And I didn't notice anything that was like out of control as far as managing people. Except for the museums. The museums had long lines of people wanting to attend, and I'm glad they're so popular. Another thing that was very popular, I was able to read a book on stage with Clifford the Red Dog, and that just happened to be Jared Bittner, our director for the Idea Museum. He did a fabulous job and made all of us look good. So if you want to get kids engaged in literacy, you need to have a dog.
Big red dog?
Yeah, it's very popular to have a dog. And so that was lots of fun. And I also did a welcome kicking off the second day of the South Pacific Island Festival on Saturday. That night was the Mesa Arts Center Gala with Yo-Yo Ma performing. It's a fabulous gala. It was successful, and Yo-Yo Ma was amazing. I enjoyed that. And then that night, I took the red eye to go to the National League of Cities, where I attended meetings. I'm on boards of the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee and the Large Cities Council. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Goforth.
I just want to say thank you to the Mesa Police Department for Commander Ash especially, and John Blank, and all the officers who showed up, as well as the Rangers for the Cops and Bobbers last Saturday at Red Mountain Park. It was great. So thank you for doing that. And then we have two events in District 5 coming up. The 25th anniversary of the Red Mountain Center is on Saturday, March 16th from 8 a.m. to 1 o'clock. Free admission. Looks like carnival rides, kids' activities, inflatables. It's always a good time.
Carnival rides always get them out.
Yeah. And then spring equinox at the Red Mountain Library on March 16th as well, from 10 to noon. So both of those are great events if anybody is interested. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I want to jump in that on this Saturday, there is a tree shade event at the Charles K. Luster Building at 640 North Mesa Drive, and they will be giving away some 5-gallon trees in conjunction with Trees Matter, and there'll be some talks and a Q&A, so please don't miss that. That is Saturday at 10 to 12. Thanks.
Great. Yes, Mr. Freeman.
Anna, I hope this works okay, but there's going to be a media announcement about the break in the burglary cases in Mesa and Phoenix. So our police department has notified me that Councilmember Spilsbury and I attended a community meeting. So that's going to be forthcoming. Can I say that, Anna?
You just did.
Well, she didn't throw her cell phone at me or anything. But I think that's tremendous to our public safety personnel in finding and catching some of our criminal activity in our community.
Is it still Pi Day or? It's still Pi Day. It's been a long meeting, but it's still Pi Day, yes. I'll just say that thank you. I had a busy week last week, split my time between the Yale Mayor's College in Washington, D.C. and South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and I can say that the city's held in high regard nationally, and I appreciated the opportunity to interact and represent the city at those events. And then I had a fun time, I think it was yesterday, spent a good part of the morning at Mountain View High School talking to their government classes and English classes about projects they're working on, so that was fun. And then I hope we're all planning on we're all participating in the first pitch at the Cubs game later today, right? I know we're all invited to do that, and it's a good reminder for us all to let we're fortunate to have two spring training facilities in our community, and that's it. It's just a lot of fun. The weather will be perfect, and I hope the public is patronizing those ballparks, because it's a great activity. Mr. Brady, what does our schedule of future meetings look like?
Mayor, talking about spring training, Saturday will be the 10th year celebration of Sloan Park in Mesa, the most successful spring training facility in all of Major League Baseball. So we're excited about the first pitch today, and then on Saturday will be the 10-year celebration of that stadium. And this remind council that we'll be meeting for our council meeting on March 18th. We'll meet at 5:45. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. That concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you, Mr. Freeman. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned.